personal anecdote about terrorism, because less than 20 years ago, I was the target of a terrorist group. It was the New World Liberation Front. They blew up power stations and put a bomb at my home when my husband was dying of cancer. And the bomb was set to detonate around 2 o'clock in the morning, but it was a construction explosive that doesn't detonate when it drops below freezing. It doesn't usually freeze in San Francisco, but on this night it dropped below freezing and the bomb didn't detonate. I was very lucky, but I thought of what might have happened. Later, this same group shot out all the windows of my home, and I know the sense of helplessness that people feel. I know the urge to arm yourself, because that's what I did. I was trained in firearms. I'd walk to the hospital when my husband was sick. I carried a concealed weapon. I made the determination that if somebody was going to try to take me out, I was going to take them with me. Now, having said all of that, that was a period of time ago. And I've watched for these 20 years as terrorism has increased, both on the far extremist left and the far extremist right in this country. I want to thank all of you for coming today, and I really want to welcome you. This is a tough battle, so welcome. I'm pleased to be joined this morning by a cross-section of Americans who have been affected by gun violence. We have with us today police chiefs, mayors, teachers, doctors, members of the clergy, mothers, gun safety groups, victims of gun violence, and many others who care deeply about this issue. I'd really like to thank my colleagues in the Senate and in the House who have chosen to stand together on this important issue. Some of us have been working to prevent gun violence for decades. Together, we are introducing legislation to help end the mass shootings that have devastated countless families and terrorized communities. Today, you will hear from some of my colleagues in the Senate. Senator Dick Durbin from Illinois, part of the leadership on the Democratic side. Senator Chuck Schumer from New York, who helped me immeasurably in 1993 by headlining, or I should say leading, the effort in the House of Representatives, which was successful. Senators Richard Blumenthal and Chris Murphy, distinguished senators from Connecticut who know firsthand about assault weapons. You will also hear from Congresswoman Carolyn McCarthy from New York, who knows firsthand the devastation of gun violence, as well as Congressman Ed Perlmutter of Colorado, who represents Aurora, and Congresswoman Elizabeth Esty, who represents Newtown. You will also hear from Mayor Michael Nutter, the distinguished mayor of Philadelphia, who leads the United States Conference of Mayors. You will hear from Commissioner Charles Ramsey of the Philadelphia Police Department, the current president of the Major Cities Police Chiefs Association, who will speak about the display of weapons you see to my left. Finally, we will hear from victims of recent mass shootings. I would also like to recognize other supporters who are here today. On the risers behind me, we have police officers from several departments, and I so thank you for joining us here today. I would also like to recognize A Million Moms for Gun Control, who are represented by Mrs. Sandberg here today, Doctors for America, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and the American Federation of Teachers. Now I'd like to introduce the very Reverend Gary Hall, Dean of Washington National Cathedral, to open this morning with a few remarks and a prayer.
Thank you, Senator Feinstein. It is an honor to be here today with you and to share in the work that you and your colleagues and Faiths United Against Gun Violence are doing. I've spoken twice at Washington National Cathedral on gun violence, and I've done it in the pulpit and in the media and in conversation with fellow faith leaders and with people in my own church. Now we have come to the end of the preaching part of our work, and we are moving forward today with a tangible solution to the epidemic as we stand with Senator Feinstein and with her congressional colleagues as they introduce this assault weapons ban. As people of faith, we have the moral obligation to stand with and for the victims of gun violence and to work to end it. We've tolerated school shootings and mall shootings and theater shootings and sniper shootings and workplace shootings and temple and church shootings and urban neighborhood shootings for far too long. Enough is enough. Now, everyone in this city seems to live in terror of the gun lobby. But I believe that the gun lobby is no match for the cross lobby, especially when we stand together as people of all faiths across the religious landscape of America. I don't want to take away someone's hunting rifle, but I can no longer justify a society that allows people other than military and police to own weapons like these, or that permits the sale of high-capacity magazines designed with the purpose of simply killing as many people as quickly as possible. On behalf of all my interfaith colleagues, whom I stand here and represent today, I ask that you join me now in a brief moment of prayer as we come together around these consensual, middle-of-the-road, common-sense legal actions being proposed today. So let us pray. Oh God, you've made human beings in your image, and you've given us hearts with which to feel the pain of others and minds to create solutions for human suffering. Give us as a people compassion and vision. Help us to respond to the crisis of gun violence not only with words but with action. Bless our elected leaders with the wisdom and the courage needed to bring about the changes that their people demand. And grant that in so doing our streets and our classrooms and our theaters and our churches may be peaceful and safe. We ask all this in God's holy name. Amen.
Thank you very much, Reverend Hall. Like all of you here today, I remain horrified by the mass murder committed at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut. I'm particularly grateful that we have both senators here and the House member representing that community. I'm also incensed that our weak gun laws allow these mass killings to be carried out again and again and again in our country. Weapons designed originally for the military to kill large numbers of people in close combat are replicated for civilian use. They fall into the hands, one way or another, of grievance killers, of gangs, of those who are mentally unstable or ill. They are sold out of trunks and back seats of automobiles in cities, as well as gun shows, with no questions asked. Massacres have taken place in businesses, law practices, malls, movie theaters, and especially schools. These massacres don't seem to stop. They continue on. Columbine, Virginia Tech, Aurora, Tucson, Oak Creek. The common thread in these shootings is each gunman used a semi-automatic assault weapon or large-capacity ammunition magazine. Military-style assault weapons have but one purpose, and in my view that's a military purpose, to hold at the hip if possible, to spray fire, to be able to kill large numbers. Since the last assault weapons ban expired in 2004, and incidentally, in the 10 years it was in place, no one took it to court. More than 350 people have been killed with assault weapons. More than 450 have been injured. We should be outraged by how easy it is for perpetrators of these horrific crimes to obtain powerful military-style weapons. Today, my colleagues and I are introducing a bill to prohibit the sale, transfer, manufacture, and importation of assault weapons and large capacity ammunition feeding devices that can accept more than 10 rounds. Let me briefly describe the legislation we're introducing. We prohibit 158 specifically named military-style firearms. Since the 1994 law expired, there has been an influx of new models of assault weapons. These models are more powerful, more lethal, and more technologically advanced than the weapons were in 1993. Our bill also prohibits other semi-automatic rifles, handguns, and shotguns that can accept a detachable magazine and have one military characteristic. One criticism of the 94 law was that it was a two-characteristic test that defined it, and that was too easy to work around. Manufacturers could simply remove one of the characteristics, and the firearm was legal. The bill we are introducing today, will make it much more difficult to work around by moving a one-characteristic test. The bill also prevents and prohibits specific loopholes, such as the slide iron stock, which can be added to an AR-15, which essentially makes it mimic automatic weapons, and it's legal. Thumbhole stocks and bullet buttons. These are all modifications that make it easy for manufacturers to evade the law. The bill prohibits semi-automatic rifles and handguns with a fixed magazine that can accept more than 10 rounds. A ban on importation of assault weapons and large capacity magazines. Elimination of the 10-year sunset. Let me tell you what the bill will not do. It will not affect hunting or sporting firearms. Instead, the bill protects hunters and sportsmen by protecting 2,200 specifically named weapons used for hunting or sporting purposes. They are by make and model exempted from the legislation. When we did this bill in 93, there were 375. Today, there are 2,200. Finally, the bill subjects existing or grandfathered weapons to a background check in the event the weapon is sold or transferred. So we have tried to learn from the bill. We have tried to recognize legal hunting rights. We have tried to recognize legal defense rights. We have tried to recognize the right of a citizen to legally possess a weapon. No weapon is taken from anyone. The purpose is to dry up the supply of these weapons over time. Therefore, there is no sunset on this bill. I'd like now to introduce, in my view, a wonderful woman. She's a leader in the fight. She's a victim of gun violence herself, and she is our lead House co-sponsor, the distinguished representative from the great state of New York, Carolyn McCarthy.
Thank you very much. You think after all these years of being in Congress and fighting for this issue, I wouldn't be nervous standing here in front of all of you. This battle has been a very lonely battle for many, many years. And I think a lot of the victims that are out there and a lot of the groups that have been fighting for this for so long probably felt that way. But when you look over here, and Senator Feinstein came because of gun violence that she witnessed. Senator Schumer, who took the lead when I wasn't in Congress, doing all the work he could to get the first assault weapons bill done. Senator Durbin, my colleagues, the mayors, the police chiefs, and everybody behind me, and then all of you. You know, a lot of words can be said, and I've got a great speech here, and my staff worked on it a long time. And I'm probably going to do what they always tell me not to do. That means just talk from my heart. I've watched the slaughter of so many people, and I've met with so many victims over the years. And in Congress, nobody wanted to touch the issue. And the last several years, the massacres were going on more and more. And going through it, I kept saying, what's wrong with all of us? How many people have to be killed before we do something? I thought for sure, after Virginia Tech, we would get something done. Aurora. But something happened in Newtown. The people of America said, how could this happen? How could this happen to our children? You know, when we have been meeting with the NRA over the last few weeks, going to trying to find how we could work together, it's been frustrating, but I still have great hope. But to be honest with you, I'm not going to be able to trust them to be there for the tough votes. And that's why all of us, and the President, by the way, and Vice President Biden, and those of us that are going to be fighting for this, are going to spread the word to the corners of this country. NRA members have been speaking out to get something done. These are good law-abiding citizens. They want to hunt. They want to go duck hunting. And the guns they use, duck hunting, you're only allowed 3 bullets. Deer hunting, depending on what state you're in, only allow 5 bullets. And most hunters will tell you, if you don't get it on the first try, you're probably not going to get it on the second one. And yet we have these machines. We have the large magazines that can take down 20 children in seconds. And the only reason that slaughter stopped because our first responders were there, and the killer ended up taking his life. Some people will say this bill won't work. Let me tell you why it will work. Because if you don't have these guns and the large magazines on the shelves, those that have done these horrific killings wouldn't be able to go into a gun store and just buy them. They don't have the background to go and look to where the black market is to be able to buy these magazines and guns. They go to the simplest place. If they're not in the stores, they can't be bought. Think of the lives that could be saved. There are a lot of people in this audience whose families have gone through a killing in their family, losing a child, losing a husband, losing a wife. And they were single killings. And we must do something to stop that also. This is only the beginning. We are going to be working on a holistic approach. We should be looking at how we can help our young people so they don't go into the world of drugs. We should be helping those children that might be having psychological problems so they don't feel that they have to take a gun to either commit suicide or to take down some of their classmates. You're going to hear from some on the opposite side of many of us that it can't be done. I'm telling you it can be done. I'm telling you with all my heart and soul it can be done. But we, as the President had said, the people, have to make those decisions. Newtown made a difference. The killing there made us all look up and into ourselves and say, why can't we do something about that? I am telling you, between this battle, between now and when we get this passed, you're going to hear from the NRA and an awful lot of them saying, that's not going to do anything. I'm saying to you, we can save lives. Think about this. Since Newtown, just about 1,000 people have died from guns. 1,000 people. Those children, their dreams, the dreams of even those that have died through other violence, never to be fulfilled. The day that incident happened, I actually was giving an interview. And it was just a reporter following up on how do I get through the holidays. And she said to me, oh my God, do you have the TV on? And that was the beginning of my nightmare again. And it is for every victim that has to go through it every single time we hear of a killing. It has to stop. It has to stop. And we can do it. And we can make a difference. And we can save thousands and thousands of lives. And I would be remiss if I did not say, for those that have survived those horrific shootings, as my son did so many years ago, whose life will never be the same, and how much it's cost this country on health care to take care of those victims. That is what this country is facing. We have to look at each other and say, yes, we can do this. We will do the right thing. Our police officers will do the right thing. But if the American people don't stand up to the lies that are being said that we can't do anything about gun violence, who loses? The future of our children. They are the ones that lose. We can do this. Please be out there for us. Thank you.
I just told her thank you. That was super. I'd like to introduce the senators who are now going to be speaking, and I will introduce them at one time, and then they will follow one another. Senator Durbin is part of the Democratic leadership. He's been a great champion of the cause over many years. He is also a member of the Judiciary Committee, to which this bill will go. Senator Chuck Schumer, who carried the original assault weapons bill in the House, knows this issue backwards and forwards. He also is a member of the Judiciary Committee. And Connecticut Senators Richard Blumenthal and Chris Murphy, who have been so diligent in comforting the families of Newtown. Senator Blumenthal is also a member of the Judiciary Committee. Gentlemen, if you would come forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Feinstein. I want to thank you for your steadfast commitment to this issue over the years. I want to thank my colleague and friend, Senator Schumer, for the same, first in the House of Representatives and the Senate. And Carolyn McCarthy, your words touch our hearts, as so many victims who stand and fight for change do. She did more than just speak out, though. She ran for office to make sure that her voice would be heard in the halls of Congress. I want to also thank those who are here today, particularly law enforcement. We cannot do this without you. We need to have your validation of what we are setting out to do. And so many others, families, victims, medical community, faith community, who are stepping up now. Because this just isn't a matter of an issue of constitution, it's an issue of conscience. An issue of conscience. We have one basic question that is being asked today, which I hope we can answer. What does it take? What does it take to move a nation? What does it take to move a Congress? We know about the thousands of victims of gun violence. We certainly know that not that long ago there was a tragedy in Arizona where one of our own, Gabriel Giffords, at a town meeting was shot point blank in the face, and others were killed in that same location. And even that incident did not move us to act. What does it take? It took 20 children in Newtown, Connecticut, and 6 others showing extraordinary courage to risk their lives and try to save and protect those same children. It was the image of those children that each and every one of us looked at and said, that could be my son or daughter. That could be my grandson, my granddaughter. And it made a difference. It was the tipping point in this national conversation. I'll never forget when Dick Blumenthal and Chris Murphy came back to tell us firsthand of what they saw in Newtown, Connecticut. And Dick undoubtedly will mention this in his remarks. He talked about standing in that building off to the side with the parents as they brought the children out of the school. And parents would rush to grab their little babies, hug them, knowing they were safe. But at the end of the day, there were 20 parents standing alone. That's what it took. The question is, what will we do about it? What can we do about it? We can only do as much as the American people help us do. We need to have their support. Their silence can't win this issue. They have to speak out. In the month after Newtown, Connecticut, where 26 innocent lives were lost to this automatic weapon, semi-automatic weapon, and a person who never should have owned it, we had over 26 killed on the streets of the city of Chicago, victims of gun violence. The tragedy continues to repeat itself. When I met with the superintendent of police in Chicago and talked about this, he brought with him a piece of evidence, much like you'll see here. It was an Uzi. The night before, that Uzi had been used on the streets of Chicago and turned on a policeman, and thank God it jammed after one round. Thank goodness no one was hurt or killed. But that is what this debate is about. Let me close by saying there's another group we need in this conversation. We need responsible hunters and sportsmen to step up and join us. Let me tell you, I grew up in this tradition in downstate Illinois. There are plenty of shotguns and hunters and sportsmen in my family. They value this part of their lives, it's part of their American tradition. They use their guns safely and responsibly. They store their guns safely, responsibly. They comply with every aspect of the law. And they shake their heads when they hear the gun lobby speak for them, saying things which they don't believe, that you need a weapon like this to go out and hunt or to go to target practice. We need them to step up. We need their voices as part of this conversation. For the critics who say, well, there just isn't any law, not the Feinstein law, not the McCarthy law that'll stop all this. That's true. But if it can save a life, if it can spare a tragedy, it is certainly worth our support and our effort.
Well, thank you, and thank you, Senator Durbin, for your eloquent words. I'd like to particularly thank my friend and colleague, Senator Feinstein. She's been just indomitable in this issue and never forgets it. We've talked about this month, probably every month since the ban expired, about how we can get it done, and the fact that she's leading this issue gives us a whole lot of faith and, of course, our respect for you. And I'd like to say just a word about Carolyn McCarthy, who I know goes to bed every night thinking about what happened to her family, but lights a candle instead of curses the darkness. So I thank both of you for your leadership. Now, as many of you know, Senator Feinstein and I have a long history of working in 1994 to pass the Omnibus Crime Bill, which included the original assault weapons ban. The crime bill made an incredible dent in the scourge of criminal violence that was plaguing our country. The successful ban of some assault weapons was a key part of that. Now, times have changed. so have the capabilities of those who would do us harm. So I applaud Senator Feinstein for drafting a updated, smart, and more robust version of the assault weapons ban, which she has outlined. It comes down to this. Assault weapons were designed for and should be used on our battlefields, not on our streets. And some don't get that. You know, we can have a rational discussion about bills like this. The Heller decision paves the way. The Heller decision said that there is a Second Amendment right to bear arms, and it should be respected, just as the First, Third, Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendments should be. It means that none of us want to take away the hunting rifle that Uncle Tommy gave you when you were 14 years old. We don't want to do that. Nor do we want to take away a sidearm that a small business owner feels he or she needs in a dangerous neighborhood. But the Heller decision had a second part, written by a very conservative court majority. It said there's a reasonable limitation on the Second Amendment, just as there are reasonable limitations on the First, Third, Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendments. The First Amendment, we love it. It's sacrosanct, freedom of speech. But you can't falsely scream fire in a crowded theater, even though that limits your First Amendment ability to speak freely. We have anti-pornography laws. We have anti-libel laws. We have libel laws. All of those are limitations on the First Amendment that are reasonable. Well, the limitations supported in Senator Feinstein's bill are reasonable limitations. We know that there is no inalienable right to own and operate 100-round clips on AR-15 assault rifles. That's certainly within the framework of the Heller decision, where hopefully both sides can meet in the middle on that basis. 100-round clips aren't used for hunting. They aren't used for self-defense. They're used to maximize the amount of damage one can do in a short amount of time. The American people know this. If you look at the polls, the American people understand that there is a Second Amendment and a right to bear arms, and they understand that there should be reasonable limitations on that right to bear arms to protect our safety. And they're wondering why we're not doing anything to protect them. We saw in the 90s that even the weakened assault weapons ban that Senator Feinstein and I passed helped save lives. The new and improved bill will save many, many more. So let's do everything we can to spare the heartache and loss we've seen in Connecticut and Colorado and New York, and in myriad smaller and less public tragedies around the country. Will it be hard? For sure. We owe it to our constituents and our country to try.
I want to join in thanking all of you for being here today on this really historic occasion, a signature moment in this profoundly significant effort to achieve an end to gun violence in our country. And I want to thank particularly Senator Feinstein for her steadfast and indomitable efforts, as well as to my Senate colleagues, but most especially to leaders of Connecticut, my colleague Chris Murphy and Elizabeth Esty, who are here today, state legislators in Connecticut, and our governor, who have formed a powerful team in the effort to reduce gun violence and keep faith with the people of Newtown and Connecticut. But I'd particularly like to thank the law enforcement community who are here today. For several decades, as a federal prosecutor, United States Attorney for Connecticut, as the State Attorney General, involved in law enforcement, I have listened to our police, our prosecutors, our law enforcement community. I've listened to them in countless forums in numerous tragedies, and they have said to me, do something about the guns. Ban the assault weapons and prohibit the high-capacity magazines. And a number of the police who came to Newtown said to me, we could not have stopped that shooter, even with the body armor we were wearing, with that kind of assault weapon shooting at us. Our law enforcement community is outgunned by criminals and mentally ill people and domestic abusers who have assault weapons and should be separated from those weapons and from all weapons. I'm listening to them, but I'm also listening to the people of Newtown. Senator Durbin's right. I was there the afternoon that parents arrived at the Sandy Hook firehouse. I came there as a public official, but what I saw was through the eyes of a parent. And I will never forget the sights and sounds of that day as parents emerged from that firehouse learning that their 5- and 6-year-old children would not be coming home that night. The SWAT team members who came from the schoolhouse hit in their guts and their hearts by the brutality and the cruelty that they saw. I am listening to people of Newtown and Connecticut who have said to me, we have to do something about the gun. And we need to keep faith with them. This measure would have helped prevent the Newtown tragedy. But for assault weapons, like the ones banned by this measure, hundreds and thousands of Americans would be alive today. But for the high-capacity magazines that would be banned in their sales also by this measure, Americans and children and educators in Newtown might well be alive today. This measure would ban these kinds of weapons that have been so destructive and so brutal in creating violence. This measure is more stringent than Connecticut's ban, and it would have prohibited the type of weapon used at Newtown. But it has to be seen as one step, part of a comprehensive strategy that also should include mental health initiatives, school security, and yes, background checks for all firearms sales, not just by licensed dealers, but also at gun shows, private sales, and background checks for all sales of ammunition. Right now, a fugitive, a felon, a drug addict, a domestic abuser can walk into a store, buy a shopping cart full of ammunition, even though he's prohibited from buying it, without any background check, no questions asked, and walk out with it. We need to change that. So Newtown is a call to action and a call for real reform. And my hope is that we will seize this moment with a sense of urgency and passion and sustain this momentum over the hard fight. Make no mistake, it will be a hard fight ahead. And always, always remember Newtown and keep faith with its victims. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Blumenthal. To Senator Feinstein, thank you for leading this effort. To all of my colleagues, new and old, to law enforcement families. Dick and I and Elizabeth were there that day, and as the father of a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old, there are a lot of moments when I wish I could take back what I saw. That just heaving, incomprehensible grief that comes, especially in those first moments of trying to understand what just happened. But make no mistake, the grief and the trauma in Newtown isn't abating. It's multiplying. Because in a tiny town like that, when you take away the lives of 20 kids and 6 adults, many of which lived in tiny little neighborhoods, 4 or 5 children came from one street in that town. The grief just continues. Let me tell you what's happening today in Newtown, Connecticut. Sandy Hook Elementary School has moved. A lot of the teachers haven't come back. A lot of the students haven't returned. But in each one of those classrooms, there's a safe word. In one 3rd grade classroom, it's monkey. And a couple times every day, a kid yells out that safe word when he gets into a conversation with a fellow student that he doesn't want to be a part of. 3rd grader talking about what he saw that day, the bodies he stepped over, the look that he caught in the shooter's eye. That's what's happening today in Newtown. That's what happens in communities that deal with one of these mass atrocities. It's not just the families who grieve, it's the trauma that just washes over these communities like waves in the weeks and months afterwards. Kids would be alive today in Newtown, Connecticut, if the law that we're proposing today were in place on December 14th of last year. It's as simple as that. Why do we know that? We know that because the data tells us, despite what the gun lobby will say, that the first assault weapons ban, even with its warts, worked. Within 9 years, there was a 2/3 drop in crimes committed with assault weapons. There was an overall drop in gun violence across the country by 7%. 40% of the mass shootings in this country, 40% in the history of this country has happened since that assault weapons expired. More kids would be alive today in Newtown today if this law was on the books because we know what the numbers tell us, but we also know what happened that day. We know that most of these incidents end when the shooter has to reload. Either the gun jams or people are allowed to intervene. You know what? To get off 100 rounds that day in about a 10-minute period of time, Adam Lanza had to reload twice. 2 times he had to reload. Things would have been different if that was 9 or 10 or 11. And second, I think there's a question as to whether he would have even driven in his mother's car in the first place if he didn't have access to a weapon that he saw in video games that gave him a false sense of courage about what he could do that day. We know that if this law was in place on December 14th, there would be little girls and boys alive today. The gun lobby has said over and over again in the last several weeks that this is just a feel-good piece of legislation. You know what? They're right about that. It would feel really good if Allison and Charlotte and Daniel and Olivia and Josephine and Anna had got to enjoy Christmas with their parents. It would feel really good if Dylan and Madeline and Catherine and Chase and Jesse and James took the bus to school this morning. Feel really good if Grace and Emily and Jack and Noah and Caroline and Jessica and Aviel and Ben were alive today. It would feel really good if parents all across this country didn't have to wake up every morning worrying that without action that their kids were at risk, just like those kids in Newtown. This is going to be hard. This is going to be difficult. But to honor those 20 lives and 6 more in Newtown, we're going to get it done. Thank you very much.
You know, I'm so proud of the courage of my fellow legislators. Would you give them a big round of applause, please? Carolyn McCarthy, I think, is such a poignant speech. But now her co-sponsors in the House of this piece of legislation are going to say a few words. And I've come to know Congressman Ed Perlmutter. He represents Aurora, Colorado. Hopefully he'll tell you a little bit about it and his staunchness of moving forward. And then the House member, Elizabeth Esty, who represents the brave town of Newtown.
Good morning. My name's Ed Perlmutter. I live in the suburbs of Denver, Colorado, and on one side of my district is Columbine High School, and on the other side of my district is Aurora, Colorado. And as you heard some of the senators speaking today, and Carolyn for sure, these events, these mass killings, affect not just the people killed or wounded, or in the case of Aurora, the hundreds traumatized that were in that theater that night, but whole communities, whole neighborhoods. And I know we have family members from Tucson, from Virginia Tech, from Newtown here today. I want to read something that was sent to us yesterday by some of the families of the Aurora victims. Our loved ones were murdered in the Aurora, Colorado theater on July 20th in one of the worst massacres in U.S. history by the exact weapons and high-capacity magazines that Senator Feinstein is addressing in her proposed legislation today. Our loved ones were gunned down and an entire generation of our families taken away in a matter of seconds. We listened to the 9/11 tapes played in court and sat in agony as we heard 30 shots fired within 27 seconds, wondering if one of those bullets killed our children. An AR-15 was used in that massacre. In 2012, this nation saw 15 mass shootings. Innocent, and I add, law-abiding people are dying violently every single day. We should not be a country whose firefighters have to wear bulletproof vests to do their jobs and save lives. What have we become as a nation when our family, friends, and even babies are losing their lives just being at school, watching a movie, going to church, shopping for groceries, and buying Christmas gifts? Our everyday freedoms as Americans are being taken away by acts of gun violence. Thank you for working to stop this epidemic of violence. Then they end with a quote from Martin Luther King. Our lives begin to end the day we remain silent on things that matter. Our future, our lives, our children matter. And this letter, and I will make it available to those who would like to see it in the press, signed by families of 7 of the people killed in Aurora. This is a tough issue for all of us. There are constitutional implications to all of this. But our responsibility as representatives and senators is to be advocates for the people we represent. And I know the people of the Denver area need to see a change here. We don't want to trample on Second Amendment rights. We believe that those rights exist to self-defense, to hunting, to sporting. But we have to do something about these mass killings with weapons that the military uses or that law enforcement uses. And it's our responsibility. And Senator, and to the other members, thank you for bringing this forward. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Elizabeth Esty, and I represent Connecticut's 5th District. And as a new member of Congress who got started as a PTA mom, who was a first-grade room parent, this was an unbelievably difficult situation to walk into. And I want to talk about the cost of inaction. Rob Sibley was in my office the other day. Rob is a volunteer firefighter, many generations in the small community of Sandy Hook. And his wife, Barb, have 2 children in the Sandy Hook school. he received a call that morning from his wife, who had gone to the school to take some medication to their son. And he got a call saying, "Rob, there's a man coming towards me with a gun. I love you," and hung up the phone. That is what the people in Newtown, Connecticut are dealing with now. Grace McDonald's parents came to the White House last week. They gave a painting by their daughter who loves pink. I know my friends and senators Richard Blumenthal and Chris Murphy joined me in this unbelievably sad parade of funerals for 6- and 7-year-olds. 8 of the girls were in the same Girl Scout troop. 5 of the boys were in the same Boy Scout troop. So imagine every graduation, every Eagle Scout ceremony, those families and all of their friends will be grieving. The pain is not over. What I've heard again and again when I've met with families and members of the community in Newtown, and what I've heard in the letters and phone calls and emails I've been receiving from around the state and around America, is that we must take meaningful action to save lives. What happened in Newtown on December 14th, 2012 was an unspeakable tragedy. But what happens now, that is up to us. Newtown must be a call to action for Congress and for all Americans who believe and who know that we can respect the rights of law-abiding gun owners, and at the same time we can save lives. Because Newtown has paid and is paying the price of inaction. Because communities across this country and my sad but growing community of fraternity and sorority of members of Congress who have lived this in their district, a growing fraternity and sorority of communities that have paid and are paying the price of political inaction, because we can no longer sit by and let the loss of precious school children, 6- and 7-year-olds, and courageous educators go unanswered. We cannot allow the loss of countless of our brothers and sisters and parents who are cut down every day by gun violence. It is time to act. It is time to renew and strengthen the assault weapons ban, and that time is now. I am so proud to join Congresswoman McCarthy, Congressman Perlmutter, in helping to introduce this important legislation in the House of Representatives. And I want to thank my friends and colleagues, the senators from Connecticut, and enormously to Diane Feinstein, Senator Feinstein, Schumer, and Durbin for their leadership. But make no mistake, it's not just our battle. It is America's battle. Senator Durbin asked an incredibly important question. He said, what does it take? What does it take for us as a nation to act? I hope, I pray, and I believe that this horror in the little town of Newtown, Connecticut is our wake-up call. It is our call as Americans to act, and to act now, to save lives. Thank you.
And now I'd like to introduce 2 great public servants. I've been privileged to be a mayor and to be part of the United States Conference of Mayors for 9 years. And the great mayor of the city of Philadelphia is here. He is the chairman of the United States Conference of Mayors, which has endorsed this legislation. And I will be calling upon him in a moment. We also have the Philadelphia Police Commissioner, Charles Ramsey, who is president of the Major Cities Chiefs Association, that also endorses this legislation. So I would like to call on both of these distinguished gentlemen to come forward. Association that also endorses this legislation. So I would like to call on both of these distinguished gentlemen to come forward.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Senator Feinstein, and the members of the House and members of the Senate who are here with us. I'm also honored that my own congressman from Philadelphia, Congressman Fattah, has joined us as well, and all who are assembled. Again, Congressman Fattah has joined us as well, and all who are assembled. Again and again and again, Americans have been stunned by senseless violence, acts involving assault weapons and large-capacity magazines. Columbine, April 1999, 13 murdered. Virginia Tech, April 2007, 32 murdered. Tucson, January 2011, 6 murdered, 12 wounded, including Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords. Aurora, July 2012, 12 murdered. Oak Creek, August 2012, 6 murdered. And on December 14th, 2012, tragedy struck again, killing 20 children and 6 educators in Newtown, Connecticut, an act that still remains incomprehensible to all of us. Too many times during the last few years, mayors have expressed shock at mass shootings. Even more frequently, many of us must cope with gun violence that occurs on the streets of our cities day after day after day after day. Weapons of mass destruction are destroying our communities, our streets, and our families. I was sworn in January of 2008 to my first term. On May 3rd, 2008, a Philadelphia police officer was killed with an AK-47, Sergeant Stephen Lesbinsky. Tell his wife, Michelle, and their children why any civilian needs one of those weapons to be out on the streets of our cities. Tell any mother or father or sister or brother or niece or nephew why their family member is no longer with us because of those kinds of weapons and handguns with high-capacity magazines. Why does anyone need one of those? This death and destruction must end right now. Every day in America, 282 people are shot, 86 of them die, and 32 of those are murdered. Every day, 50 children are shot, 8 of them die, including 5 who are murdered. This must stop. The legislation which Senator Feinstein and others are introducing this morning and today will help to end the insanity. I am here to register the strong support of the U.S. Conference of Mayors for the assault weapons ban of 2013. And we commit as an organization, hundreds of mayors all across America, small, medium, and large cities. We are committed to doing everything necessary to ensure this legislation becomes law. I have available for you today a letter originally sent just 3 days after the Newtown tragedy occurred, and now signed by 210 mayors all across the country, which calls on the President and the Congress to take immediate action to make reasonable changes in our gun laws and regulations. Listed first in that letter was our recommendation for the enactment of legislation to ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines that has now been presented by Senator Diane Feinstein and others. When she discussed this bill and her commitment to passing it at the U.S. Conference's winter meeting just last week here in Washington, Senator Feinstein described herself as, quote, a former mayor on a mission. Senator Feinstein, you have an array of current mayors on a mission, standing with you, ready to do whatever is necessary to make sure this bill becomes law. Let's move forward. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much, Senator Feinstein, and your colleagues in both the Senate and also all of the House of Representatives members that are here today in support of this legislation. Today I'm speaking on behalf of the Major City Chiefs Association. The Major City Chiefs is an organization made up of the 63 largest cities in the United States. Association. The Major City Chiefs is an organization made up of the 63 largest cities in the United States. And I have the honor of serving as president of that organization. I also serve as president of the Police Executive Research Forum that stands solidly behind this legislation. And on my way down here, Senator, I was on the train and I received a call from Bart Johnson, the executive director of the International Association of Chiefs of Police, which is the largest of all the police organizations. Unfortunately, they could not be here today, but they wanted me to pass on to you their full support in this legislation. I also see colleagues in the audience, members of both the Major City Chiefs as well as the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. My good friend Jim Johnson, Baltimore County, who is the chair of the National Prevention for Gun Violence. Thank you for being here as well. But I'm also here to speak for myself. I've been in law enforcement more than 40 years. As a member of the Chicago Police Department, I spent 30 years in that department. I spent 9 years as police chief here in Washington, D.C., and for the last 5 years, I've been police commissioner in Philadelphia. I've seen a lot of violence over that period of time, but nothing compares to the devastation caused by assault weapons. I was doing an interview not too long ago, one of our local news stations. We just had a homicide in Philadelphia, and it was a particularly gruesome scene with multiple shell casings. And one of the reporters and I were just in conversation, and I asked him, when was the last time he went to a crime scene where he only saw one shell casing on the ground? And he couldn't remember, and I can't remember. I don't think people really understand the firepower that's out there on the streets, that our officers have to face every day and citizens of our cities have to face every day. To my left is a display of weapons. I don't claim to be an expert in the workings of a firearm, but I am an expert in terms of understanding the carnage that they cause on the streets of our city. 4 of those weapons I want to single out for you because they are examples of the kinds of the actual weapons that were used in some of our more notorious slayings. The Bushmaster XM-15, a military-style assault weapon that was used in the Newtown, I'll call it Newtown Massacre, because that's exactly what it was. That's in the center there of the middle panel. A 33-round extended magazine, similar to the one used in Tucson, Arizona, in which Congresswoman Giffords was shot and 6 people were murdered. That's, again, in the center display. Smith & Wesson M&P 15, the assault rifle used in Aurora, Colorado, when 12 people were shot dead. That's right on your left there at the very top. And, of course, the Tech 9 assault pistol used in a San Francisco shooting in which 8 people were dead. And Tech 9s, of course, are one of the more commonly seized firearms off the streets of our various cities. It's time for us to do something, folks. I mean, this is legislation that is needed, but it's not the only thing that's needed. We have to go beyond just an assault weapons ban. Our streets are hemorrhaging out there, and we have a responsibility to do something. And we've been through this before, where there's an awful lot of conversation around gun violence on the streets of our city. Every time you have a massacre like Newtown, Aurora, Columbine, you name it, the list just goes on and on and on. But then after about 2 or 3 weeks, it starts to kind of quiet down a little bit. And then it's business as usual as lobbyists begin to kind of quietly go about trying to influence the outcome of any legislation that's passed. 20 children slaughtered at one time in a schoolhouse in a town that many of us in this room probably never even heard of until this happened. A town that you just wouldn't expect something like this to take place. If the slaughter of 20 babies does not capture and hold your attention, then I give up, because I don't know what else will. We have to pass legislation. We can't allow the legislation to get so watered down and filled with loopholes that we have to pass legislation. We can't allow the legislation to get so watered down and filled with loopholes that it is meaningless and won't do anything. This is just the start, folks. Look at this and tell me why any of this needs to be on the streets of our cities. If you can tell me that, I'll listen to you. But guess what? I don't think any of you can, because there's absolutely no reason. They weren't meant to be in Philadelphia, in Newtown, Connecticut, in Aurora, Colorado, in San Francisco. That's not what it's there for. They weren't made for that. How are you going to go hunting with something like that? You kill something, there's nothing left to eat. I mean, we listen to all these arguments. They say, well, it won't prevent. I've been in this business more than 40 years, and I can honestly tell you, you don't know what you prevent. We deal with what we didn't prevent for the most part. But I also believe that we make a difference, that the laws we have on the books in this country make a difference. If something as simple as a safety lock had been on that weapon used in Newtown, we probably would not be here today talking about the murder of all those children. Why? Because the shooter wouldn't have had access to that firearm. Yet we can't even get simple legislation passed to report guns lost or stolen, have them registered, make sure you have safety locks. I mean, come on. We're not trying to seize everybody's guns, but we need reasonable gun control in this country, or guess what? It will happen again. So thank you all. Thank you all for being here. This is just the start. We have to remain vigilant, and we have to pay attention to what's going on. The organizations that I represent pledge our full support, Senator, and we will do anything we can to help you see this through. Thank you.
Because we're in the halls of Congress, I think it's easy to forget the very real human face of gun violence. And so we've asked a few victims to come forward, and they will introduce themselves. They will tell you what happened to them very briefly. And I hope you will go away seeing how human an issue this is, how rending asunder it does of families, and how America really needs to stand up and end it. Would you all please come forward in one right after the other? Oh, here, sorry.
Hello, my name is Lori Haas. On the morning of April 16th, 2007, I received a phone call from my daughter Emily, and she said, "Mommy, I've been shot." We learned subsequent to that the shooter his weapon was equipped with a high-capacity magazine and was able to do great carnage that day. Our family fully supports the assault weapons ban of 2013. Thank you, everyone here.
My name is Pam Simon. Standing with me is my husband, Professor Bruce Simon. I was on the staff of Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords. On the morning of January 8th, 2011, I was standing a few feet from the Congresswoman when I was shot in the chest and in the arm. On that day, 30 bullets were delivered in less than 30 seconds, killing 6, including my staff member and dear friend, Gabe Zimmerman, and wounding 13 others, including one of your own, Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords. We fully support this legislation. Thank you so much.
My name is Colin Goddard. I was one of the survivors from the shooting at Virginia Tech in 2007. I was shot just above my left knee. I was shot in both of my hips, and I was shot through my right shoulder. I carry 3 of those 4 bullets with me now for the rest of my life. I'm here on behalf of the 32 Hokies that didn't make it that day, and the 32 Americans, 32 of us that are murdered by guns every single day.
My name is Omar Samaha.
Single day.
My name is Omar Samaha. My sister Rima Samaha followed me to Virginia Tech just after I graduated. She was an 18-year-old freshman, 4.0 student. She had her life ahead of her. Over 50 people were killed in a matter of minutes at Virginia Tech that morning. The gunman had 30-round magazine clips, multiple of them that he was able to purchase over the internet. It devastated my family. We support this legislation, and we know many, many other Americans who have been through this support it as well. Thank you, Senators and Representatives.
My name is Zoe Haptu. I was an injured survivor in the German class. Thank you. Sorry. Thank you. My name is Zoe Haptu. I was injured in this German class in Virginia Tech. I have a bullet still in my head. I was shot in the jaw. It's 1 millimeter away from my brainstem. It's still there. I was shot in my wrist. I suffered so much pain, and I'm still undergoing my medical process, and it's going to be long-term care. My family has suffered, just like the other 32 families have suffered. The fellow survivors, our friends, our loved ones, our communities. Sandy Hook is a wake-up call, and we need to support sensible legislation on gun safety, such as this measure. So thank you, Senator Feinstein, and thank you for all of you for being so strong leaders and supporting sensible legislation like this. Thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Uma Loganathan. My father was Professor G.V. Loganathan. He taught civil engineering at Virginia Tech, and he was killed on the morning. Closer. Oh. And a little louder if you can. Okay. My father was killed on the morning of April 16th, 2007. I didn't know that the shootings were going on until noon because I was in class. And my mother had the unfortunate task of telling both me and my 13-year-old sister that we did not have a father. He would not be coming home. I won't be telling you about these high-capacity magazine rounds because everybody else has told you that. But I cannot tell you or describe the amount of pain and suffering that not only my family or our friends have experienced, but the community of Blacksburg, our fellow survivors. I cannot begin to describe how important this legislation is and how much your support would mean to us in general. Thank you.
My name is Maya Rachamim. I'm here on behalf of my father, Reuven Rachamim, who was killed last September in a workplace shooting in Minneapolis, along with 5 other dads. I'm here because my family supports legislation to ensure that these kinds of tragedies don't happen, and so that they don't have to get the call that their father or mother or brother or sister or child will not be coming home that night. And so I want to thank you for your leadership.
This is a picture of me and my mother that I gave my mom sophomore year of high school in this frame. My parents were returning a boat in America's safest city in Thousand Oaks, California, May 30th, 2005, when a man with a history of violence and an easy access to weapons shot my dad 3 times and shot and killed my mother, who stayed and tried to keep others alive. I cannot express the importance of this
and other legislation. And I cannot express enough thanks from my family and community to all of you for everything that you do. Thank you.
This afternoon in the Senate, I will be introducing this bill. Carolyn McCarthy and Ed Perlmutter will introduce it in the House. Ladies and gentlemen, we have done our best to craft a responsible bill to ban these assault weapons. Guns designed for military. Craft a responsible bill to ban these assault weapons. Guns designed for military use, bought all over this country and often used for mass murder. This is really an uphill road. If anyone asks today, can you win this? The answer is, we don't know. It's so uphill. There is one great hope out there, and that is you, because you are stronger than the gun lobby. You are stronger than the gun manufacturers. But only if you stand up, if America rises up, if people care enough to call every member of the House and every member of the Senate and say, we have had enough. These weapons do not belong on the streets of our towns, our cities, in our schools, in our malls, in our workplaces, in our movie theaters. Enough is enough. We can win this. But it depends on America, and it depends on the courage of Americans. Thank you so much